Hello and welcome to the show. And with me, I have Jack. Jack has been helping me out. I'm here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and you can see I'm in my kitchen. Anyway, Jack has been helping me out a lot on YouTube mostly. And we found out the other day that people are not really hip to the AI stuff. And so we put an experiment out there, and then we saw the comments and we pulled it back. But the funny thing is someone last night was thinking that Charles Lear, who reads the audio blogs, they got all mad at me and said that he was AI. And no, of course, that was Charles Lear's voice. But anyway, so Jack's with me through this show tonight. We have Chris Johnston. He's an attorney who had a long lifetime interest in UFOs. And it's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about sort of the legal, how would this be approached in a court of law. And he is sitting right now in a courtroom, his own private courtroom in Des Moines. And so he'll be coming up. But just quickly, so next week, let me just go over a couple of different things. This coming Friday's guest is Professor Simon. And what a character. I hope you watch that at 6 p.m. He's a great guy, lots of fun. So Prof. Simon, I think his YouTube channel, lots of followers, and he talks about UFOs. And then next Tuesday we have John Burroughs, and Toby is going to be Toby from the Roswell, New Mexico. Both are going to be on together next week. So that's basically the blog this week is Val Johnson's UFO encounter back in 1979. That's from Charles Lear. Check that out over at podcastufo.com. And you can support the show over there. We have lots and hundreds of blogs over there that come out every week. So check out podcastufo.com. And thank you all for being here. I'm excited about our guests. Before we bring our guest in, though, Jack, I'm going to ask you, you got interested in this topic not all that long ago, and you're helping me a lot on YouTube. I really appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
But can you tell us how you got into the UFO topic? And it was kind of the same way I did. I had an encounter.
Yeah.
And if you would tell the audience, and it's in Exeter, New Hampshire, where the noted incident Exeter happened, back when. But go ahead if you would.
Yeah. So I got started on the topic just because I had my own, sighting with a classic like red and white pulsating orb right in Exeter, New Hampshire. It was I was just a regular night, a Saturday night at like 7:45 p.m. back in 2022, and I had just got dinner for the night. I was getting a barbecue chicken calzone, I was just getting my junk food for the day. And there was this floating red orb just above the trees. And the light would literally blink in and out. And then I would see it floating a little bit further along down the tree path. So I thought maybe I should go check it out with the guys inside the pizza shop and say, hey, you got to come out and see this UFO. But I thought for sure they would think I was a whack job or a crazy person. So I just got in my car and I followed it all the way to this person's house. And this red orb, I was like 200 feet away from it. And I was just looking right up above it while I was floating over this person's house. And it shut its light off again. And it got so dark that it was darker than the night sky behind it. So in that moment, I didn't know anything about UFOs at the time, but I literally thought I was seeing spots. Like when you look at the sun, it's something really bright and you just have spots in your vision. But so I just went home. I literally thought it vanished and disappeared out of thin air. And I just went home and I ate my dinner for the night. But look, with all the research I've done now and the content I've watched on your show, Martin, I'm pretty sure I left it while it was still there. And I really think it was still there. It was like this dark circular center with like a bubble around it with squiggly lines that sort of outlined the dark center spot when it turned its red like plasma light off, if you want to call it that. But it was pretty far out there. It was all about like 4 to 5 minutes, and I'll probably never forget that. It was such a weird, and it was totally silent. There was zero sound.
That's the part that freaked me out about my own sighting is like I couldn't understand how this thing could be moving and doing what it was doing without any type of noise. And that was the most eerie part of my sighting that I had, but anyway, it's thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. And we're going to bring in our guests. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Martin. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Chris.
Good to have you on. And So if you would, let's hear a little bit about your background and how you got, interested in this topic in general, and what was the genesis for you to write your book.
Sure. Well, first, for kind of the less exciting part, I am a trial lawyer by trade. I'm based here. I have offices in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then Des Moines, Iowa. I happen to be down here in Des Moines, as you said a minute ago, here in my private courtroom. All those normal things. I'm a 55-year-old man. I got grown kids, and I was born in '69, which is kind of significant to kind of how I got into all of this. Some people may not know, right now, UFOs, they're everywhere. Every channel you turn on, there's always UFO stuff going on. But in the 70s, that wasn't really the deal. Even though Roswell happened in '47, I'm sure a lot of your viewers are familiar with Stanton Friedman. And it really wasn't until he started poking around in the Roswell topic in the mid 70s that things really took off. No pun intended. And my dad, even before that came out, he was a science fiction fan, believer in all things out there. So when UFOs kind of came to the mainstream, some kids are playing catch with their dad or going fishing. And I lived in central Wisconsin. It's a ranch style house. And we used to go out the bathroom window. My dad and I would lay on this part of the roof and look up at the stars. Now, according to him, everything, is a UFO, but that's really what got my interest in the topic going. And it stuck with me, and I got older and did all the normal things. And then kids were finally out of the house, and it gave me more time to get back into, interests, just things outside of my law firm. And so that's how it all came together in a nutshell.
And so what made you decide to actually write the book? I want to ask you that. And first of all, how has it been received? And I'm going to ask you a third question to think of. How are your colleagues, and how's that being received by I'm sure your friends and colleagues?
Sure. Well, I wrote the book. I'm a creative type, and I have happy feet. Thus, my private courtroom and my law museum, I've always have all these irons in the fire. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do is write a book. And I don't know where that came from. It just was something that I wanted to do. And so I finally, as I referenced, I had that confluence of kids leaving the house, professionally, things calming down. I'm in my 25th year now, things get a little calmer when you're in your 50s for some of us. And so the timing was simply right to blend those passions of my day job and my night job, maybe if you'd call it. So that's why I wrote it, from the 30,000 foot view. And then as I started working on it, some other reasons were coming to light why I was doing this. And one of them being, I started realizing by presenting the witnesses with a direct exam and a cross exam, it were just right next to each other like you have in trial. That was even making me having more of a critical eye about the Roswell topic. And I started becoming a big believer that, boy, if even one person that reads this book, because of my book, does more than reads a headline or takes something at face value, that's a win. And that's what it's turned into that I really, really want. And I've got some great real world examples, that we could talk about here later if you'd like. But how it's received, it's been received very well. People, I've had non-lawyers and they've told me, boy, I used to be certain that Jesse Marcel this, or I was positive that it was a weather balloon. And now I've had some people go, now I'm not so sure. And I don't know that I've had any full-fledged converts, but that's okay. I got people thinking, and I don't care if it's about Roswell or your back door. Let's think about things, and let's, think it through and talk it through and look at both sides of things. So in that respect, it's been received very well, I think. As far as my colleagues, they all get a kick out of it, and they all, they know me pretty well, and they're kind of not surprised that Chris would be the one doing this. But the one thing on the lawyer side of it that I've been really happy about, all my lawyer friends that have read it, all say, and then kind of move on. They go, well, you nailed the procedure. And then they get into it. And meaning by that, I've sat through hundreds and hundreds of jury trials. So my book is also provides some insight. You know, if you like these Law and Order type of shows, okay, well, what's it really like to be on a jury? My book puts you there, from the jury summons to the jury pool, to the voir dire, to everything involved in the course of a trial. The readers are seeing it firsthand. So when my buddies tell me, oh yeah, you got the procedure just nailed, well, that's good, because that means, you know, the non-lawyers, the group that are reading it, are seeing and getting the real deal of what happens in a courtroom. So it's kind of another angle towards the book. And so
at some point, oh, go ahead.
No, so I was going to say, I think I might have mixed my how it was received along with my colleagues. I have not had one colleague yet, other than my partner, when I told him I was writing this book. A shout out to Chris Martineau. And I told him, and he said, okay, but the first time I'm in trial and a potential juror says, hey, are you hooked up with that UFO guy? He goes, then you're done. Then you're not doing this anymore. But until then, you know, in my take on it, I've had some people go, oh, it's kind of a weird topic for a lawyer. To which I say, since I've become, you know, over, say, the last 10 years, so I had 15 years of practicing law under my belt. If Jack wanted to go to law school and he came and said, hey, Chris, what's one of the most important things about being an attorney? I would tell anyone this exact same answer: creativity. We all know the law. We all can read statutes. We can all apply the statutes to the fact pattern. But the number of calls that I get from other lawyers, they'll call me up like, all right, Chris, here's the fact pattern. And it's always some crazy outlandish thing that happened to somebody. And then they will say, what are my theories of liability? Because I just don't see it. Well, I'm creative. I can, you know, I don't want to, not spinning gold out of wool over here, but I have the ability to look at things a little bit differently than most guys do, and I can put together these theories of liability. So point being, if anyone wants to bust on me for writing a book about such a topic, I think it's that very fact that makes me, in part, the lawyer that I am. And so I'm fine with that.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple of things. Let's just say that and I muted your mic just while I'm talking because there's a little feedback there, and I'll bring it back up. But let's just say that I'm the state of New Mexico and the prosecution, and you are representing the Roswell, the client. And I want you to kind of go through how you would bring this case and what the arguments would be, but at some point. But the question one of the things I want to say is, what I always tell people that are skeptical about Roswell is the very first start of the whole situation is, why on earth would the Army Air Force ever come out and say that we've captured a disc to begin with? I mean, that to me is like there's something more to it just because of that alone. And of course, they retracted it after. But I just wanted to hear your feedback on that.
Sure. Well, first, I should preface this that in my book, I don't take a position one way or the other. I wrote it from this omnipotent position. It's up to the reader to decide. Personally, so before I get into this, I should probably say what my actual belief is. I believe, based on the evidence that exists, that an extraterrestrial craft crashed. I'm not on board yet. I don't think the evidence supports the fact that there were extraterrestrial bodies. But I'll go all day long that, yes, there was a craft, there that crashed. So with that said, kind of how you go about it, and Martin, not to split hairs, but just so you use the correct terminology, you had mentioned the prosecution and whatnot. A case like this, as portrayed in my book, would be a civil case. So when you have a civil case, there is no prosecutor and there's no state involvement. It's simply party A versus party B. So in my book, I set it up, the believers, and they're the ones that brought the case, right, to have this decided, versus the skeptics. It would really, in real life, it would be the plaintiff versus the defendant. But I thought hey, we can have a little bit of fun here. And, and plus it helped me remember what side I was talking about at any given time. Right. So it would go, this trial really couldn't happen, right? Just procedurally, there's a lot of issues. But if it did, the plaintiff would bring the case against, this group of skeptics. And the big deal about being a plaintiff or being the believers in this case is that the burden of proof falls on the party that brings the case. So in this situation, the skeptics don't have to prove anything, right? It's a reasonable doubt standard. And any honest defense lawyer will tell you their job is a lot easier than the plaintiff lawyers because we have the burden of proof. And all they, as a plaintiff guy, I say that, all they do is sit back and poke a hole here and maybe a hole here and maybe a dent here, boom, done, and they win. So it would be structured plaintiff versus defendant. Procedurally, plaintiff goes first with their case in chief with direct exam and cross exam. Then they rest their case in chief, and then you turn it over to the defendant / skeptics, and they present their witnesses with direct and cross and that kind of thing. So just from a procedure standpoint, that's what it would look like.
I see. And you're pretty confident that if you were representing the believers, that you think you would have a strong case?
I do. Yep. And I think that if you're ever in the market for a plaintiff lawyer, this is the kind of attitude you want. I'd win that case. If I represented the plaintiffs, I would win that case. Now, in real life, then you start getting into the percentages. Okay, how many times do you win that case? And I think the evidence that is out there, which admittedly, the zero physical evidence, and all the witnesses, of course, are deceased and whatnot. But if I could put this case together based on what we have with the actual witnesses, I think I win it 6 to 7 times out of 10.
So we have some people asking questions. Here's a statement from one of our great listeners, watchers here. The disc was the ultimate cover story at the time. All it specified was disc, not that it was tech known. But didn't they also have out in the paper that there was not just that they captured a disc? Didn't they also say there was a saucer, or am I getting that confused with something else?
Have you seen the word saucer used in this? I know what the writer is talking about there, and I have seen disc and saucer used interchangeably, but without that initial press report right in front of me, I don't want to get into what other than the headline indeed did say disc. And I kind of like that comment because, boy, talking about splitting hairs, right? Disc versus saucer. It's an interesting look at that.
Yes, that's right. Actually, there was the Roswell record, and I'm looking at your thumbnail that we had created, and it says that it was a flying saucer on the headline. Actually, does say that the Roswell record in 1947. So it did actually say that. Not the split hairs, like you say. Now we do have people that pose questions, and I do appreciate any of the people. Thank you all for being in chat and for participating. I appreciate it. And if you do have a question, do please put it in all caps so I can catch it and get it up there if it makes sense. So the question here from Duckhead, I like that name. How do you both react to the new Ross Coulthart revelation about the Tic Tac? He has been compromised. People are talking about the Tic Tac. Ross came out with a revelation. So did Professor Simon that I have coming up on Friday. But two different things. Professor Simon looked and found out about Lockheed Martin. You'll hear this on Friday in the interview some time ago, but it did not act at all or react at all like the Tic Tac. But I don't know if you're even familiar with this. Are you at all? Have you been following any of this?
Not a lot. He's a gentleman worked for Lockheed. You might even just said that, or he's coming out saying that Tic Tac was a Lockheed product, right?
Right.
Beyond that, no, I haven't done any independent digging or looking at that.
Yeah, but he also came back on. He also did a reel recently where he kind of stepped to that back a little bit and just saying that some of them, and like that type of thing, and not saying that it's 100% of what the story was there.
Sure. I think my big question about him or anybody else, as this relates exactly to my book and what I was hopeful for. And again, with Ross, I don't know exactly what he came forward with, but it was topic of David Grush and a bunch of people jumping up and down about the congressional hearings and sort of this is it. It's all out there now. Okay, well, objection, hearsay, because what was said in the skiff, the Martins and Jackson Chris's will never, ever know. However, what I heard made for public consumption. Well, I talked to 42 people and they told objection. That is, to me, absolutely worthless. I don't care who you talk to. You got to show the receipts, because otherwise I could make up the most outlandish thing in the whole entire world and the people take it to the bank. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Go look at the transcripts of what Grush actually told us, and it's not a lot.
Well, I got to say a couple things about that. First of all, I was there in the courtroom. I was there in the building at the time, and it was a very historic feeling event. But supposedly, he had given testimony, under oath prior to that, with some details that did have things that people could chase down. Now, I don't know exactly how that panned out. I don't know if they actually did look into it. There's a lot of controversy about that, whether AARO, actually took them serious and looked into things or not. So, but I understand what you're saying. If someone is just saying something, then it's anecdotally, and we just, it's not factual. And so that was a secondhand account, basically, is what you're saying doesn't hold up, right?
Right, correct. And let me be clear. I am in no way suggesting Mr. Grush is fabricating or anything else.
I don't think so either. Yes.
I'm looking strictly from what was actually said, that, again, and you said it yourself, Martin, that was made for public consumption. And I have no idea what was said, in the privacy of the skiffs or whatever other testimony that he gave. So that's where I say, well, great, let's step back and look what we actually learned relative to his testimony. And that's where I come back to, well, at least I didn't really learn anything other than he's talked to a whole bunch of people who said a whole bunch of stuff, which, again, and I might even mention this earlier, I'm also aware of, Martin and Jack and Chris, we're all at the bar talking, and some stories are going to sound pretty realistic, and we might even go, yeah, I'm probably on board with that. That's a whole different deal than admissible in a courtroom. So I'm aware of that. So I am a bit walking this line.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Here's a question from chat here from Terrence. And wouldn't the most logical explanation, they said it was a UFO disc, be the truth? Then they have lied ever since, both. I kind of get the gist of that, right? Mm-hmm. So basically they said that, wouldn't you think when they first came out with that, why would they come out with that if that wasn't what they believed? That's what I have to say.
Yeah, and I think your viewer is exactly right. That could very well be exactly the situation. The first press release was correct. The materials went down to Ramey. He thought, holy cow, they're right. Let's quick issue a retraction for national security, whatever reasons that they had to issue the retraction. But could I buy that it was a disc that crashed? And in fact, that is the version that I do buy. A disc crashed, materials were packaged up, sent to Fort Worth. Ramey had the retraction issued, and from there it went roughly probably to Wright Pat.
Yep. Here's another interesting question right here from Victor. What is the most compelling evidence would be that you would present in a civil suit that would win the case for Roswell, in your opinion?
Sure. Well,
is it the whole, the sum of the whole?
Put it this way: the winning piece of evidence, if it were to exist and we could get our hands on, is some of the debris that was collected by Mac Brazzle. The memory metal you hear about.
Yep.
That, right? Because then you could have metallurgy done on it. You could have a million things done on it. So what exists today, again, that average Joe like me could get my hands on, there's nothing, which is probably exactly the way the government likes it.
Yes, it was a case where a while, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, there was a guy, I can't think of his name right now, Chandler or something like that, who came forward and said that he found a box marked Roswell, and he was in the, I thought he said the CIA, but they wouldn't have anything to do with something, domestically. But still, whatever it was, he claimed that he found this box of Roswell. Did you ever hear of that situation, or was that too long ago for you?
I heard in passing something about it, and the fact that I haven't heard anything else since that about it, interesting. And not to say that gentleman is, because what do I know? But I'm a member of MUFON, and I've written several articles for the MUFON Journal. And I just recently had a piece on disinformation agents that was published in MUFON. So when I hear something like that, is that just a rogue guy who wants some attention? Is it an agency that is trying to deflect, or is it just an actual honest God guy that found some stuff? But that kind of seems a little too convenient. I don't know, to mark a box Roswell, might as well put secret, don't tell anybody, right?
Yeah, I know it would be a number most likely, or some type of code or something.
Yeah, we also Raiders of the Lost Ark, the big warehouse. It'd be something like that, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be Roswell. It's pretty funny. Okay, so this is a good point. Terrence Wright, why does it take over 200 Army personnel and a general to collect a weather balloon? Right? I mean, that's a very good point. And that's the things that need to be pointed out to the people that are skeptic. And why was there secrecy? It can't be because it was the mogul balloon. It was all made of, parts that weather balloons were made of, and other, sensors and things like that, but nothing that would be so secretive that, these people would be threatened and all that.
Yeah. And I agree in that comment. You've got sharp listeners. I've done a lot of these. These are great questions.
Yeah.
Right. It ties back in with the previous question about wouldn't the easiest, most direct story be the disk crashed and it's been a cover up since then? Sure. And that ties in exactly with that viewer's comment that they support one another, right? Why would you need 200 Army personnel for that? Now, as my wife likes to point out to me, there's the old, I believe you believe it, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily make something. So I suppose if I were on the skeptic side or the defense side, I would, the fact that we had 200 guys there, is it possible that at the time we thought it was something, so we had the appropriate amount of security and then still found out we were wrong? It's kind of the best you got. But also to buy that story, you have to buy that General Ramey was totally wrong as well. And it seems hard to believe that somebody in his status would make a mistake like saying something's a disc when it's not.
Right. Now, with the way someone just brought up a point, I'm going to bring it up here, and that's the Ramey memo. With the way AI is going, you would think that people would be having AI all over the Ramey memo to see if they could crack that better. I know that people have done excellent work with really, high power equipment over the years, and they think, there's a lot of things that they can pull out of it, and that doesn't make any sense for it to be a weather balloon, that's for sure. So the question is here from T Hammer, thank you. Have you seen the blow up of the Ramey memo where he took a picture with Philip Corso? Do you think it shows that what was really written in it?
Not yet. I've seen, probably like everyone else out there, I've seen the various shows with various runs using AI and different ways to try to interpret that Ramey memo. And thus far, I saw one, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he did a really even-handed approach to it. And probably the most even-handed approach I've seen, where he said, okay, I've got it kind of solved down to this word, and this word could be disk, or it could be not disk. I'm drawing a blank on what it is. So I think I'm hopeful that we're pretty close to having kind of a firm answer on what the Ramey memo had to say. And again, yeah, as AI advances and advances. So for me, the jury is out on what exactly that memo said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had a question for you too, Chris. There's a Jeremy Corbell a couple of weeks ago. He was kind of teasing out sort of like he floated the idea of getting a bunch of people together to follow up on FOIA requests and sort of form, this isn't his words, but rather mine, like a UFO FOIA coalition or whatever. And I know that process can take years to try and get footage that can come to light for the public to view. But I wanted to ask you, from your legal perspective, is there anything that you think maybe the UFO community isn't leveraging as far as the legal system is concerned to try and help bring disclosure 1 inch forward that might not be already being used today, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Let me take a note here. From the legal perspective, Martin, I'd imagine you're no doubt familiar with Danny Sheehan.
Yes, he's been on my show a number of times. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to lawyers in this world, I point right at Danny, because he's got the expertise, the background. For your listeners that don't know, Danny Sheehan is very, very well respected trial attorney, and he's been at it for probably longer than I've been alive, or close to it. He did a lot of environmental torts, toxic torts, so things like 3M leaching chemicals into the water, Aaron Brockovich types of cases. So he has also been a lifelong ufologist. So he started a group called, Martin, are they the Paradigm Institute?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Danny has the Paradigm Institute in DC, just down the street from Congress, and he employs, I don't know what capacity, might just be volunteers, but lobbyists, other lawyers, people that are actually writing bills and trotting them down the street to Congress, to try to force disclosure. So he is, in my estimation, he's top dog in the legal world when it comes to the UFO topic. What other lawyers like I can do, yeah, I've been approached several times about FOIA requests and FOIA request appeals. That is a tough road to hoe. It doesn't get you any. There's certain things, when being an attorney really helps grease the wheels. When you're dealing with the feds, that isn't really one of them. They could really not care, much less than they do.
Sure.
But one thing that's kind of a newer area of law that I've been trying to formulate an article about it. It's just not quite there yet. But there's a new thing in my world called citizen evidence. And it really is being used in these environmental types of cases, where it used to be, well, Martin's got this stream in his backyard and he says it's got a 10-legged frog out there. Well, eventually some experts and some legal people would come out there and they do a bunch of years of testing, and then they'd go, Martin was right, or whatever the case is. Well, now we're seeing a shift to Martin catching the frog and putting it in a jar, and Jack catching the weird looking snail and putting that in a jar, and citizens piling up the evidence and delivering it. Now, it still has to go through, the vetting and all this kind of thing, but it literally is called citizen evidence, and it's becoming more and more accepted in the courts. They're not Brian, this Iowa jurisdiction, they probably wouldn't do it, but you get into, bigger areas, more liberal areas, the courts are starting to look at this citizen evidence. And sure, they'd ask, well, where did it come from? Well, Martin went and got it, but then he brought it to the guy, and and everything's fine. So once I have my head wrapped better around the citizen evidence concept, then I'm trying to figure out, what exists in the way of citizen evidence in the UFO world. And then I'd like to package it up and get it to Danny Sheehan. But, and again, that's not a lawyer thing. That's everybody kind of thing.
Right. Just a comment, Roswell Army Airfield was the equivalent of Area 51 as far as testing experimental weapons at that time. which is this person's very well. She really knows her stuff when it comes up with these things. But that wasn't a question; it was just a comment. So here's a question for you. What is Chris's opinion on these craft being controlled by consciousness? Lockheed apparently has people doing this according to Ross. Wow, I haven't heard that one. I don't know. I haven't heard that one. That it was, maybe I did hear him say something about that. You know, a lot of people are talking about, what is it, psionics or something like that. But I can't even imagine how we could have that technology. Even if it was reverse engineered, I still can't imagine. But anyway.
Yeah, big shock. I have a thought about that. And but it's a thought that, again, it's not fully resolved. So similar yet different, but I will get it back to the thought of controlling a ship that way. So again, say another name, Stephen Greer, and with his CE5 and summoning UFOs. All right. On the one hand, I've read what's been said. I've read, a lot about, Dr. Greer and that kind of thing. So a guy can, come up with draw his own conclusions. On the other hand, what's one of the constants between virtually every alien abduction story is, well, yeah, they talked to me, but it was telepathically. Okay, well, if I'm okay believing that, because I do believe that, well, I don't know the range of telepathy and how far it can go into the atmosphere or whatever, however it works. It would be logically consistent to say, if I believe that an alien could communicate with me telepathically, I could communicate with it telepathically. So, as I said in Caddyshack, so there's a shot, I guess is what I'm saying on that. I believe that extraterrestrials could certainly have the technology to pilot a ship via consciousness. Now, do I believe earthbound tech is anywhere near caught up with that? Beats me. But again, would I rule it out? No, I wouldn't rule it out. Based on just those couple little nuggets I just talked about, I could make a good argument and somewhat support that it is being controlled by consciousness. Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, so many things. If you have an open mind, there's so many possibilities of what could be happening. Mm-hmm. Here's quite a long question of two possibilities. One, Roswell was NHI Tech. Other, it was Lockheed. Can you argue both for and against assertions that it's both? In other words, Lockheed Military and NHI working together?
Well, I think Mr. Alexander might be a law professor. Holy cats. Is that a loaded, long question? And really, as I sit here now, I really can't argue both sides. I wouldn't even say I could argue one side of that effectively. So I guess, to be intellectually honest, to your listener, no, today I can't argue, both sides. I would say this: I think enough is out there that arguments can and have been made, on both sides of that. But I don't really have a position on that, nor has it really been an area of my digging into. So I wouldn't really. It'd be us girls sitting at the bar, as far as that goes.
Yeah. Here's another question. Do you think? Why do you think the real reason is behind all the cover up?
Sure. I think take your pick of the. I don't accept any of these because I think it's a bunch of hooey. But I suppose if we could get to the person who's in charge of all the UFO material and shake the truth out of them, and they told us, it would probably be along those lines of, oh, well, you couldn't possibly handle it. The citizens, everybody would go crazy. Society would fall apart. The economy would crash. Religions would be upended. I don't believe any of that, especially in 2025. Whereas I don't know the numbers, but I think most people you ask at the shopping mall be like, yeah, they're probably really, nobody is that jammed up about it. So, but I think that there'd be some ridiculous answer from the government about that. But in reality, it would more likely be trying to protect technology, and as they always say, follow the money. That would answer it.
Yeah, answers a lot of questions. Another good question here, I think, if full disclosure happens, are there people who would end up facing prosecution? And can you name key positions that would be scrutinized?
In reality, I mean, would anybody be prosecuted? I doubt it. And that's not based on any great UFO knowledge or legal knowledge. That's just look at our society and look at what has happened and does happen in our government. There's no ramifications. There'll be some, horse and pony show and some shaking of the fingers, but does anything ever really happen? No. So I don't think anybody would be prosecuted. And that's a great question about, okay, let's say they're not going to be prosecuted, but what positions are really involved in this? And, that's one of the reasons I don't believe that any of the presidential administrations have ever had full knowledge of this. Those are temporary jobs, whether they like to think so or not. I think that information is being held and curated by, not like you said, but the deep state, who I don't even know who the deep state would be. But I think more likely than not, a lot of the prosecution, if that were even an issue, would be sidestepped, because I bet you a whole bunch of this stuff is in the hands of a private third party who's exempt from FOIAs and everything else.
Sure.
So you're going to go sue Bob Bigelow? He's just a regular guy that runs a business. You're not doing anything to him.
I had the first interview with Christopher Mellon back in 2015. And I asked him the question. I said, if the president asked the question, they said they wanted to know what the government knew about UFOs, would they have to answer? And he says, yes, they would have to answer. And that's why they keep it compartmentalized, need to know. So it would be very convoluted before any answers could, go to the president. So
as you said, and as he said, all by design, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things I've always wondered about Roswell, and how does a legacy situation move forward through time? In other words, it's generational. These people are, in the military for a while, they're in the government for a while, they pass on, they retire, whatever it is, and now it comes to a new generation and over again. We're talking 75 years. How does this thing, how would evidence move forward in a situation like that? Is any ideas? I mean, I'm just asking an opinion.
Yeah, well, I was watching TV the other night, and of course, the big hot topic was the Epstein files. And it dawned on me as I was watching the news, holy crap, we're seeing Roswell in real time, right? Look at the corollaries between the two. And then I realized, well, you can just chalk that up to any governmental mystery. And what do we know happened after 75, 80 years with Roswell? Well, now everything's gone and lost. Sorry, citizens, go out there and remain ignorant because your government's not going to tell you. We're hearing the same thing. Oh yeah, it's Epstein's. It's all missing. It's in real time and is unfolding. So now we'll flash forward 20 years and there's going to be some other problem, some sex trafficker and some president, something going on. Well, Epstein will be kind of reconstituted, and then there'll be some tweaks to the story. It'll be even worse than he really is, if that's possible. And then that'll kind of die down. And then, 40 years from, holy crap, this guy Epstein. That's what we saw with Roswell. That same idea. And in particular, to show things getting fancier as time went on. There wasn't a lot of discussion about extraterrestrial bodies early on in Roswell. That's something that popped up later. Then we have the mysterious disappearing nurse. Well, she told it's kind of, so yeah, the story just moves through time as whatever's popular culturally. And then you go back and you start pulling the stories that kind of support, where we are now. And then the old telephone game, of course, it's all different and way better by the time it's today than it was in reality.
Yeah. I've always thought, I wonder how much of Roswell is a fantasy. They have that big event every year, and, people, I just wonder where down the road that will morph to, if it will morph in any type of way. But here's a question, and I want to tell Terrence, you need to watch the show I have coming up on Friday, because I had to pre-record that with Professor Simon Holland, because he's in Paris and the time zone didn't work. So check that out Friday, because he talks about this very question quite a bit. And the question Terrence asks here is, wouldn't the Department of Energy be involved in all of this? And according to Friday, I just want you to listen to Professor Simon talk about that. But what's your opinion?
Possible. The Department of Energy, one of the things that I like about kind of their relation to all this is the Department of Energy really runs all rare earth metals in the United States. Not a lot of people know that, but I have a source, and that's what he does, is distills rare earth metals for the Department of Energy. So I've had some conversations with him about, at first, for your listeners, rare earth metals typically aren't rare at all. They were just named that when they were first discovered because people thought they were rare, but we could go in our backyard and scoop some up right now, different kinds of rare earth metals. My source tells me twice in 30 years, he had a metal come through. He distilled a metal that came through that he had never seen before, heard of before, or was talked to about before, and it was being requested only by the United States government. That one really, for him, and he's more of a cynic than anything else. And this gentleman was just telling me, I've distilled, you name it, praseodymium, all these metals that have all these weird properties to them. He tells me he's distilled this one type of metal twice that he didn't know anything about and was just told just to distill it and make it, deliver it, and he did. So I find that, your question, your caller, your listener asked about the Department of Energy, and that's just some anecdotal, I get it, objection, hearsay, right? However, it's one of my guys, and I believe him because I've known him my whole life. And that's what he told me. So yeah, Department of Energy, that wouldn't surprise me because they are into some of that kind of stuff.
This question in particular, I'm not going to really ask you, but for Julian, but if anyone in chat wants to answer this for him, please do. So I have to say that we do have a lot of people really participating in nice questions tonight. And I want to thank you all in chat for that. And here's another one. Has DARPA N3 project been discussed? Be it viable for something that was already been utilized? Does this have anything to do with what we're talking about here? I don't really know if we've talked about this or would talk about it when in regards to the Roswell case. I don't think so, since DARPA was created a lot after. Sorry, I wasn't able to read that. I am actually having a problem with my glasses. I can't see through them. I had a issue with them, so I ordered new glasses. But so I'm having a hard time seeing here before I read these things. But anyway, there is again a lot of people that are asking some great ones. But please try related to the topic tonight that we're talking about, Roswell. So things that people say to me a lot about Roswell. So that's 75 years ago. What new could you possibly hear about that? Why are we still talking about Roswell? So if someone was going to say that to you, why are we still talking about Roswell? What would you say?
To that exact, you walk up to me and go, why are we still talking about Roswell? I would say to you, well, was it a UFO or was it a weather balloon? Right? And then most people, I'm not sure. That's why we're still talking about it. It's a mystery, and people love a mystery, and it's not solved. And there's all kinds of cool, sexy angles to it. And it almost, what do you like in the UFO world? Because Roswell has most of a bunch of it. But ultimately go back because it hasn't been settled, one way or the other. And people we're curious and we're driven and we want to know. One thing, Martin, in my book, I heard you talk about any new material. So yeah, when people come up to you and say, hey, there's no new material, I unearthed this. I thought this is a fact. So I'm pleased with it, but all it really shows us is another piece of the mystery. But if we are to believe many folks at face value that the UFO, the crashed craft, and the alien bodies were shipped off to Wright Pat, right? That's kind of the standard party line on that.
Yep.
Well, I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, Wright Pat, I could see sending crashed craft materials there, given what their area emphasis is at Wright Pat. But extraterrestrial bodies, wouldn't you want, X-rays, MRIs, autopsies, the whole bit. And I knew someone who was in the Air Force and was at that hospital for a number of years. And this person told me, even now, this was 25 years ago, even now we don't really do that kind of advanced medical care at that hospital. So just last week, I was kicking around that fact again, going, boy, that's interesting. So I looked it up. The hospital at Wright Pat was not built until 1952. So if we're to believe people at face value, you're telling me they sent this crash craft and extraterrestrial bodies to a base that has what are you going to do with them? You're just going to squirrel them away in a locker. So I think that is very curious because, again, we'd have to take at face value there were bodies, and I would stake just about everything I got. They did not go to Wright Pat with those bodies.
Wow. So if there were bodies, they would have gone somewhere else with them. That's basically,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So this is just a comment I'm putting up because there's a lot of really good comments made by that person. But so we only have about, 3 or 4 minutes left. Basically, the time has moved along pretty quickly. So I guess I would have to say someone asked this question earlier, but I would say, what do you think the most compelling part of the Roswell incident is that makes it, believable that it happened?
Yeah, and I would go to my very first witness in my book. I think the best witness for the believers is Mac Brazzle.
Mm-hmm.
There you have he's not a military guy. He's not trying to get his name in the paper. He's a ranch hand, and we've all known guys like him. I bet he didn't want anything he wanted to go out and do his thing and get in his truck and go to the next, but, and now instead he gets wrapped up, in this now 80-year-long mystery. He found the materials, he put them in his truck, drove around with them in his truck for, 1 to 3 days, depending on what interview you go with. So let's pick the middle and say 2 days. The guy finds the stuff, throws in his truck, drives around, lives his life for 2 days before he happens to talk to his neighbor, who says, oh, that's kind of weird. You ought to go to the sheriff. And he kind of be great. Yeah, okay. And he took it to the sheriff. So whose testimony, in my opinion, unjaded, unshaded, Mac Brazzle, just telling his story. This is what I found. This is what it looked like. This is what it did. And he would be hard to impeach.
Wow. That's great. Just a real quick question here, and then we got to wrap it up here. If someone had possession of the I-beam that Marcel Sr. showed his children, should that be brought forward as evidence if someone actually? And I would say yes, heck yes.
I would say heck yes, and don't give it to the government. Go give it to Martin. Give it to Jack. Don't give it to the government. I got you, Jack.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. And the name of the book and where can someone find it?
The name of the book is Roswell, The Truth on Trial. It's available on Amazon, or my shameless plug, it's also available on my law firm website, which is lawgroupofiowa.com. About halfway down the homepage, picture of my book. It's a big red button, buy Chris's book. And one nice thing about that site, it also has my professional bio. If anyone is at home going, he's not who he said, it's all on the website. On the drop down, Chris Johnston is my name.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
It has. Thank you. Thank you both.
Yes. All right. Take care. All right, everyone. So we'll be back next week. And actually, first of all, don't forget to tune in Friday at 6 p.m. for Professor Simon Holland. And then next week, we'll be back on Tuesday with John Burroughs and Toby. And thank you, Jack.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.